Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked where I climb the Online Series 10 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. Today we are using another team built by one of my favorite team builders in Sword and Shield, tsltang. I've linked their Twitter down in the description below, and yeah, they have come up with just some of the craziest ideas and high level teams that we featured throughout so many episodes of Road to Ranked. And this one is actually a little bit more standard relative to some of the other teams that they've built, but it features Choice Specs Eternatus, which is not something that it's super common. And at first I was like, oh, is Choice Specs really a big difference maker on an Eternatus? But after trying it out, the answer is yes. This thing just does so much damage, and very few people often expect the Choice Specs. And one thing that's really cool is that you actually can use Eternabeam, which is not very common on Eternatus at all. Part of the reason why you can afford to use it is, one, you have Choice Specs, so that's already an increase in power that can often pick up one-hit KOs you otherwise wouldn't get without the specs. And two, this team actually has Roar on Suicune, so you can actually use Eternabeam and then Roar yourself out to reset that slot for Eternatus. So it's a pretty niche play. You're not going to go for it that frequently, but it's just one really cool play to call out, and I think it's so neat. So in a couple practice games I played with this team, I actually haven't used Eternabeam yet, so I'm hoping to at least see that animation at least once. But either way, Specs Eternatus just does so much damage and can KO a lot of the common Pokemon even when they have Assault Vest. One of the main reasons you want to use Eternatus in this format is because it generally matches up really well into the most common non-restricted Pokemon. Regieleki can't deal much damage into it, Rillaboom can't deal much into it, Instinct can maybe Parting Shot or Snarl into it, but also won't do too much damage into it, and then both of the Urshifu forms, you can close combat or Wicked Blow, but neither are really one-shotting Eternatus, and Eternatus can one-shot pretty much all the Pokemon I just listed thanks to the Choice Specs. So it's a relatively standard team outside of that. In addition, outside of, you do have the Roar and Suicune, so that's helpful for Eternatus. And then you have Choice Scarf Landorus-I as well. Now, Scarf Landorus-I is really interesting because, once again, it's one of those items that people just don't expect on Landorus very much. Almost every time you run into Landorus, you're going to probably expect Life Orb. So as a result, with the Choice Scarf, you get to do some fun things. Namely, you outspeed a lot of Pokemon that you otherwise wouldn't outspeed, the main one kind of being Zacian, right? But the key thing here is that you can just get a burst of damage off before your opponent expects it. And Scarf Landorus is just one of those sets that, a lot of players often underestimate and don't expect to run into. So, yeah, I think that, once again, a team that has relatively standard Pokemon, but just a couple of small deviations just in item choices alone can really go a huge distance. So I'm excited to try it out. Thanks to tsltang for the team. Details in the description below. Thanks to you all as always for watching. If you enjoyed, please show your support by leaving a like on the video. I'd really appreciate it. And question of the day, I want to know what your favorite Pokemon spin-off game is down in the comments section below. For me, it definitely is the OG Mystery Dungeons, the first couple. And yeah, Stadium was always fun. XD and Coliseum were some of my first Pokemon games as well. So yeah. But if I had to pick an all-time favorite, it would probably be either the first or the second Mystery Dungeon. So let me know yours in the comment section below, and let's get started. Alright, first game of the day, and we're up against rank number 20. That should be exciting. They're going to be a pretty fast-paced offensive team here with Calyrex Shadow Rider. Four potential Focus Sash users, actually. So there's Calyrex, Whimsicott, Rillaboom, and Mienshao. Only one of those can actually have Sash. So be curious to see what the item distribution here is. Magnet or Specs makes more sense on Rillaboom here over Sash. Mienshao typically likes using Focus Sash, so it could be Sash on Mienshao, Life Orb on Calyrex, Eject Button, or Rocky Helmet on Whimsicott. We've got Specs, Calyrex, Suicune is generally valuable, as is Instinct. I think I like... if I go with Suicune and Instant lead, though, the only fear is if they go Calyrex and Mienshao, right? That's a problem. We don't have knockoff on this either. I'm just a little bit nervous about them leading Regieleki. And we do have Dark Urshifu here, right? Okay, that's not a bad bring either. I'm gonna go with Suicune, Urshifu, Instant, and Eternatus. Scarf Landorus is interesting here, but they have a Whimsicott, so we can't really cheese knockouts, and if they just set up Tailwind, they're just gonna outspeed us anyway. And we can't, if I could one-shot the Calyrex with Landorus, then I think I'd think about bringing it a little bit more. but I can't, right? So what's coming up from my opponent? Okay, it is just going to be Mienshao plus Calyrex. Meaning turn 1, it's pretty free for me to protect Tailwind. The question here is whether or not you have Feint on Calyrex. You could also switch Calyrex out, right? Because I could protect with Urshifu relatively safely. Don't mind going for a Tailwind. My one fear here is they just go for Close Combat and Astro Barrage to try to snipe down Suicune. So I'm actually down to Sucker Punch here. Because I don't even know if your Calyrex can knock out my Urshifu right now. And yeah, they're just going to give it to me. Are you Sash though? Yep, okay. So that's where the Sash was. But that might mean that we can survive a Close Combat and an Astro Barrage onto the Suicune slot. And maybe they Close Combat at Urshifu here instead. Okay, we can definitely take a Close Combat on Suicune. Barring a crit. Beautiful. That sets us up to be in a fantastic position. And this is exactly why I wanted... Oh, it's Eject Pack. Okay, that's cool. This is exactly why I wanted to lead with Urshifu, because if I lead with Incineroar, I can't click Fake Out onto Calyrex, and then Mienshao is Inner Focus, so I can't flinch that either. Eject Pack's actually a really big item bring for my opponent here, though, because it means you get a free switch into that Whimsicott. I guess that's where actually maybe having Landorus would have had some value for us. But it's not a bad turn. I am down to... I mean, Sucker Punch on my end here is so obvious. I will outspeed with my Suicune. So I lean towards going for Snarl here and then switching out into Incineroar. Because I want to conserve Urshifu right now. And I feel like Sucker Punch is just entirely too obvious. So Calyrex, I would expect to switch here into Mienshao. I guess a switch to Mienshao is still pretty scary if I'm just bringing Incin right now. Could have maybe Close Combated that slot instead. If I was like hard reading the Mienshao switch in, which should be the case. Yeah. Okay, it looks like Whimsicott here is actually not going to opt to Tailwind. That's actually a pretty big deal because it means that this next turn I can actually fake out the Whimsicott to deny it from Tailwinding. Although now it means my opponent will have a pretty strong late game Tailwind, which is quite scary. But Moonblast does no damage to us there after Snarl, which is quite nice. I wouldn't mind knocking out Mienshao here either. They're probably incentivized to click Close Combat. I would Close Combat Incin here. So I want to like Scald into this and then switch out into Calyrex. I could also give up Incineroar here because then I get a free switching back into Urshifu, but Incin's so good against the Whimsicott plus Calyrex duo. So maybe I actually even give up Urshifu, because at this point Urshifu's done primarily what I needed to, which is bring Calyrex down to its Sash. My only fear is if Skull doesn't KO Mienshao if at -1 special defense after Close Combat. So they go for the Tailwind there, yep. I just don't think I'm going to be able to be in a position where I can... oh, great target, though. Okay, they target Suicune. That's a very good play by them and puts me in a really tricky spot. However, I will be able to bring in the Specs Eternatus, and Eternatus will outspeed Mienshao right now, so I can freely Sludge Bomb the Mienshao slot and then probably switch Urshifu out. It's just that I think Whimsicott here is probably like eject button. The last turn of Tailwind on my end, they still have 3 turns, which obviously isn't great for us. So yeah, I'm going to Sludge Bomb here. Because they don't have a Sludge Bomb switch in, and then just switch out into Incineroar. That was a great play to target the Suicune there. But what could I have done there? I guess I could have Flare Blitzed into the Mienshao slot and doubled up into it. Yeah, they're going to swap Mienshao out into Entei. Okay, that's not too bad. I mean, I don't mind getting a Spec Sludge Bomb off here, but like I said, it could be like Trick Whimsicott. Rocky Helmet would naturally be the item I would guess here. The Inner Focus is tough, and that's why my opponent's team is well constructed, right? You have 2 Inner Focus users. Okay, Whimsicott reveals Protect. We've seen Protect, Tailwind, Moonblast. That's all really standard. I get a big Spec Sludge Bomb off here, which is actually really nice for us. That's definitely Assault Vested. We do get a Lucky Poison, though, because that actually turns that into a 2-hit KO now into Entei, which is kind of a big deal here. My Tailwind peters out. They have 2 turns of Tailwind left. Here it's a free Sludge Bomb into Entei and just Flare Blitz. But one thing I have to consider here is it actually worth going for Flare Blitz here? Because if I get the knockout onto this thing, my opponent gets a free switch into both Mienshao and Calyrex, to which then you can just close combat and go for a Psychic type attack onto Eternatus. So this is one of those scenarios where I'm not sure I actually want to pick up a knockout right now. Instead, I'm actually leaning towards going for Sludge Bomb onto Whimsicott and then a Parting Shot here onto the Entei instead. Helping Hand. That's probably Helping Hand Stomping, right? It's Stone Edge. Does that KO us though? It does. Okay. I feel like that should win them the game then. Could have switched into Urshifu there. That wouldn't have been a terrible play. Fake Out wouldn't have done anything there because Whimsicott has higher priority with Helping Hand. It's one of the main reasons you want to use Helping Hand. It's going to be a close finish. You should always bring out Mienshao if you're my opponent right now. Yeah. So now with Mienshao, you can obviously click Fake Out, or you could just straight up close combat. But if you're my opponent, you know that it is the last Mare Tailwind on your end. I mean, truthfully, this should be able to take... Like, I think I should just protect here. I'm just worried about Feint now from the Mienshao. The other question is with... Do they have Feint, man? That's the question. Because the thing is, I could just Sucker Punch Entei here and just Sludge Bomb Mienshao and pick up a double KO right now. I feel like protecting Urshifu is so obvious, I almost want to go for that. Okay. Because, yeah, if you go all in and double up onto the Urshifu, and they go for Feint, nice, okay. So if they didn't go for E-Speed, I think Sucker Punch should just KO here. Beautiful. We did get a little bit lucky in this game with the poison, though, because I think without the poison, I'm not confident on being able to knock out the Entei with Sludge Bomb into Sucker Punch. So, yeah, I'm really glad I didn't protect there, and that's the scary thing. Like, the main thing is, I think, like, from my opponent's perspective, protect is so obvious that if you Fake Out and Sacred Fire into it, you just lose the game, most likely. And so if you go for Feint as I try to protect, you instantly win the game. So there I was willing to make a gamble there, because in the worst case, if you Fake Out Eternatus, Sucker Punch still knocks out Entei. So in order to deny the Sucker Punch, you basically have to click Fake Out or close combat onto Urshifu. Let me just finish this turn real quick. But if you click close combat into Urshifu, like, the play they could have made to counteract what I did was actually withdraw Entei out into the Calyrex and then close combat into Urshifu. That would have won them the game. But that's generally a pretty hard play to make, because if I just protect Urshifu there and then Sludge Bomb the Mienshao slot, Mienshao just feints, Calyrex comes back in, and then the endgame is Calyrex at 1 HP, plus the Entei is poisoned against my spot. To which then I could probably just Sucker Punch the Entei. Yeah, and then just go for the knockout onto Calyrex. So I'm glad that the Sucker Punch play worked out there. It seemed a little bit risky, but that was just a position where I really thought, you know, it looks like my obvious play is to protect there, and I figured might as well just go for the Sucker Punch. So we went for some aggressive Sucker Punches in this game, both onto the Calyrex and onto the Entei, and it paid off really, really well. And at the end of the day, like, we didn't get huge amounts of damage off with the Eternatus, but it was still really crucial, right, in being able to potentially put Entei... Well, we were very lucky with that poison, because without the poison, I don't think Sucker Punch KOs, but Sludge Bomb with 2 ticks of poison then was enough to pick up the knockout onto Entei. So Sludge Bomb was nice there, and obviously was able to just one-shot the Mienshao, which was super sweet. So this was like a kind of an awkward matchup for Eternatus, because my opponent has AV Entei as well as Calyrex Shadow Rider, and Calyrex Shadow Rider just does a ton of damage with Psychic type damage. So it wasn't like the ideal matchup for it. But at the end of the day, Eternatus you'll want to bring pretty much all the time, and it still does really good damage even in like suboptimal matchups. So yeah, that was a fun first game, and let's keep it going. Next game of the day, and it's another Calyrex Shadow Rider team. Okay. It's always funny when we like play against like the same restricted over and over again in one episode. So this definitely, once again, like, Specs Eternatus was still decent in the last one, but it doesn't get to shine as much just because Calyrex is really scary with the, you know, Psychic type attack, especially if it's Life Orbed. This one is where Landorus is actually really interesting as a lead. Their best way would be, like, I could see Rillaboom Suicune, Rillaboom Calyrex. Like, the main fear is Rillaboom Calyrex, although I guess then I could go Instant Suicune. How do they really beat Instant plus Suicune? It's not the easiest matchup for them with those two. Landorus just is like a little bit more tempting here for the Scarf Earth power, but once again, doesn't really deal that much damage. This is also one in which maybe I'm willing to lead Eternatus. Like, Eternatus plus Instant here is interesting to me. Urshifu in the back, and then the question is, do I even bring Suicune? I think it is valuable, generally. I don't know, Rillaboom could actually be pretty solid for us here. Because I'm just expecting to get outsped anyway, especially with them having Suicune. Okay, I'm actually down for Rillaboom, because we have priority Grassy Glide with that, right? So, by bringing both Rillaboom and Urshifu, I have dual priority into the Calyrex. The main reason I didn't want to lead Suicune here is because they have a Regieleki and a Rillaboom, so both of those are pretty scary. However, this is where Eternatus gets to shine, where neither of those can do much damage to Eternatus, and Eternatus can just one-shot either. So let's see. Yeah, it's going to be Rillaboom Urshifu. Okay, I'm okay with that. It's Water Urshifu. Now the question, as always, is where is the Choice... Sorry, where's the Focus Sash on this team? Now, if you're my opponent turn 1, you could obviously just Fake Out into the Incineroar and Surging Strikes into it. So... the question is whether they'd go for that. And then the question is, would I be willing to lose Instant here? Because if I'm expecting Fake Out and Surging Strikes into Instant, I could obviously pivot Instant out into Rillaboom right now. That seemingly feels like a really strong play. And then like Sludge Bomb into Urshifu. I think I'm generally okay with this because even if you click Fake Out into Eternatus, like Surging Strikes doesn't do much damage to it, right? And I think if you're my opponent, it is pretty easy to tunnel vision onto trying to knock out Instant. So even in the worst case, which is them like Fake Out into the Eternatus and reading into the Rillaboom switching, it's not even that bad for us. Okay, so they do go for Fake Out onto Eternatus. That crit isn't amazing to see just because every little bit of damage adds up here. But it is just a Surging Strike, so that's fine. Because the thing there is if I click Fake Out onto Urshifu, I break the Sash and I can just outspeed and KO with Sludge Bomb the next turn, right? But this is still not even that bad of a position, right? Like, I get Rillaboom in, I would say safely, but still take a fair amount of damage there. That's enough damage to make me wonder if that's a C instance on the Urshifu. I don't think that's... yeah, I don't think that's going to be Focus Sash here. Maybe Surging Strikes really does that much into Rillaboom. So the good thing here is, once again, they don't have a Poison Resist. I guess I could Dynamax Cannon, actually. Do they have a Dragon Resist? No, they don't. Now, the reason a Sludge Bomb is because of the Poison chance. In case they are actually Focus Sashed on this. I think here, though, I'm down to Sludge Bomb into the Rillaboom and Fake Out into Urshifu. I mean, you would think Urshifu is going to switch out here, actually, right? Or Protect. I'm actually down to Woodhammer because it punishes a switch really heavily. Oh, interesting. They don't switch or Protect. Okay. Well, we one-shot Rillaboom, so that's nice, but... what is Urshifu going for? Just another Surging Strikes? Oh, no, they're not choiced. Okay. So they close combat. I'm sure they're Focus Sashed here and then, but that's fine generally, although I could have just denied it an attack, and we're going to take a fair amount of recoil from Woodhammer here. Yeah. Okay, Surging Strikes just did more than I expected into Rillaboom. And I actually knocked myself out, but that's not necessarily bad because it means a free switch in for me right now. But it feels like it could have gone a little bit better, right? If I like click Fake Out and Sludge Bomb into Urshifu there, that's pretty nice. But that means you're... yeah, wait, I can just bring in my Urshifu now, right? Because it means you're... if I bring in Instant, I'm just worried about this getting one-shot. So, like, if I bring in Urshifu, now I can just pressure with Sucker Punch on a Calyrex and Sludge Bomb into Urshifu. That's pretty good. If I clicked Fake Out last turn, it would have broken Sash. Then I could have just clicked Grassy Glide, but I don't mind going for... I also could have gone for Glide there, but I wanted to cover for a potential switch out, right? So they bring out Calyrex as expected. And I have Dark Urshifu, which is obviously good for us. We know it's going to be Life Orb most likely on Calyrex. It could be Specs, Scarf, or like Spell Tag. or whatever the ghost boosting item is. But knowing it's not Focus Sash is a big deal because it means I do pressure with a potential one-hit KO with Sucker Punch. Truthfully, here I lean towards Wicked Blow. What's the fear here? Calyrex protects as I Sucker Punch. Oh, they don't have Fake... I knocked out their only Fake Out user. But they could sub, and sub is what I'm worried about here. Okay, they just go for Astral Barrage. That's fine, right? You didn't go for a Psychic type attack. Yeah, that's game over. Because we just outspeed Urshifu. They needed to go for a Psychic type attack there, and they could have won if they go for a Psychic type attack onto Eternatus. Also, they weren't Life Orb there, so what's the item? Yeah, I think I really wanted to cover for Substitute there because if Calyrex gets a free sub up, and like we knock out Urshifu and they get a free switch into Regieleki, this game becomes really awkward. So I just did not want to play into that. You can see the value of Specs Eternatus though, right? Just like one-shotting Rillaboom, and like if it's AV, even through AV, I'm pretty sure we can get the one-hit KO most of the time. Yeah, and just like having an extra burst of damage that your opponents often don't expect. Okay, their last one was Entei. Cool. What's our last one? I mean, this should be a wrap. I'm just trying to think, because if it's Assault Vested, it could still be scary. Eternate Beam can miss. Dynamax Cannon is slightly stronger. I think here it's fine, honestly, just Sludge Bomb and Sucker Punch. Yeah. Like, Entei just doesn't have enough damage to deal with all three Pokemon at once. But, you know, even when you feel like the game is 100% won, you just want to, like, take one turn and think through it and make sure you don't, like, throw the game. But there wasn't much incentive to switch out there, even if they were Assault Vested. I am curious what the items were. Like, it's always interesting when you go up against teams where it's like 3 Pokemon, 1 an Assault Vest, or 3 Pokemon, 1 a Focus Sash. Like, that first game, for example, is one in which, like, there were so many Pokemon that, like, got value at a Focus Sash. So, that one was interesting. You could see how, you know, their lead, they led with Rillaboom, right? And Urshifu. So had I led with Suicune there, you know, they could have just pressured Suicune with the KO immediately. And the good thing is that they didn't actually have great damage into Eternatus outside of the Calyrex. So that turn was a little bit scary, and I could have clicked Sucker Punch into Calyrex instead, but Sub is a fairly common move on Life Orb Calyrex sets. So I just wanted to respect that option because, yeah, in a world in which they do have Substitute, and I don't do any damage to Calyrex or even pressure breaking the sub, then they get sub up, I knock out Urshifu, they get a free switch in, and suddenly it's a sub Calyrex that outspeeds me, as well as their 4th Pokemon into my Urshifu and my Eternatus with Instant in the back. So, yeah, we've generally been lucky with making our predictions against Calyrex today, so I'll take it. But Calyrex is always such a volatile matchup, and like both of these games could have swung the complete opposite direction just off one turn, right? Like, yeah, with this one, I don't know. I don't know if a Psychic type attack would have one-shot Eternatus, so that's the main question. Don't know what item they were there either, so I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, let's just keep it going. Third match of our day. I'm recording this late at night, and it's interesting. I mean, you know, we're going up against a lot of high-ranked Korean and Japanese players, so I guess Calyrex is just really dominant in the meta, and like relatively high ladder play right now, which isn't super surprising, but it's funny once again when we have this like string of games where we just play the same restricted all the time, because like Series 10 is a lot more diverse than this. But yeah, it's just a pretty interesting string of matchups. Okay. I mean, this team is like obviously really similar to the last two that we went up against. Once again, it's the guessing where the Focus Sash is. I almost want to lead Eternatus this time, but once again, it's the Mienshao plus Calyrex lead that's really scary, right? So what did I do against that? I went Urshifu Suicune, but this time around, that's a little bit less consistent of a lead because they do have the Rillaboom and that Regieleki. I just really, really dislike leading Instant into a potential Mienshao, and I feel like my opponent's almost always leading Mienshao. Just, do you go with Mienshao and Calyrex? I'm going to go Instant Suicune, I think. It's just it's a little bit risky here. You know, I actually think the play was maybe just to go with Rillaboom and Suicune, but Instance Intimidate's valuable here. It's really valuable into their Rillaboom, so it's funny that this is kind of like a combination of the previous two teams. I mean, I don't mind playing against the same comp over and over again, right? But it's just funny that it's 3 Calyrex Shadow Rider comps in a row. It is just Mienshao plus Calyrex. I mean, I don't love that. Because you're probably just going to close combat Instant turn 1, right? The thing is, if you close combat an Astro Barrage, I could easily pivot Instant out right now. Or I could just sacrifice Instant and say, okay, well, you get a knockout onto this, but then you give me a free switch in into my, my Eternatus. The thing is, like, I just couldn't go with Urshifu and Suicune with as much confidence as game 1 because they have a Rillaboom and an Regieleki on their team, and leading either of those would be pretty bad, especially Rillaboom. Pretty bad for us to see, that is. So I'm going to Tailwind turn 1 here, and this is an interesting decision where I can actually fake out Mienshao specifically to break Focus Sash. However, if my opponent's leading this, I'm like 95% sure that the Sash is indeed on the Calyrex. So I could switch in Eternatus, don't love that. I could switch in the Urshifu, don't love that. So I think here, I am just willing to give up the... Yeah, I'm just willing to give up my Instant to get Tailwind up and a free switch in into Eternatus. Oh, that's interesting though. They actually protect. Yeah, and they just close combat. I mean, that's fine. Protect is fine because it means you... Like, that was a free Astral Barrage for them, right? But it makes sense if you're worried about, like, a feint coming out. Or not a feint, sorry. Wow, it's just another eject. Yeah, it's just... It's interesting to see how the meta has shifted and how people realize that Focus Sash allows Calyrex to be a little bit consistent. So now you can bring out Rillaboom, and that's a really big issue for us, especially with Instinct going down. Now what I can do, obviously, is just bring out my... Oh, they bring Whimsicott out. Okay. I don't mind that too much, although now I Tailwind and they can just match my Tailwind. Whimsicott can also Encore here, but I feel like that generally doesn't have too much utility for my opponent. So I can Snarl here. If I'm my opponent, honestly, I'm switching out Calyrex right now into Mienshao and then Tailwinding with Whimsicott. I don't mind Snarling to break Sashes. I don't know though, like, if I actually read into that switch, I could Scald into Calyrex. They might also just Tailwind and go for a Psychic type attack onto Eternatus though, so I have to respect that option as well. Okay, I'm down to Snarl here, just because there is still the chance that Eternatus is Life Orbed. And Sludge Bomb Whim. Yep, there's the switch. I think that's Mienshao coming out, so I really wanted to Scald there, but... Meh. Oh, they protect! That's a really good play. It's one in which I could have just gotten a free knockout onto the Mienshao. And then they just bring Calyrex out and they're in the same spot. So that was a good play by them and I walked into it. I should have considered the protect option. 2 turns of Tailwind left. Okay. I'm down to Scald here. Surely they fake out into Eternatus, but I can't really do much about it this turn. That's fine. The main thing we have going for us is that my opponent doesn't have huge damage output going into the next turn of the game. And... what we want to do is not actually pick up a KO right now, I think. No burn. If I'm my opponent now, I would actually close combat Suicune and protect the Whimsicott. And what I want to do is intentionally not knock out Mienshao because I don't want to give my opponent a free switch into Calyrex right now. But you know what the issue is that, like, what do I do with this? I have to Sludge Bomb something. I'm gonna Scald and Sludge Bomb here, hoping Whimsicott protects this turn. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, this is a scenario in which I don't want to pick up a knockout right now. Because if I get a knockout and Calyrex comes back in, it's just looking really rough for us. Yeah, so there's close combat. 207. That was a lot of damage, wow. And a crit. Okay. That is not good for us. That's gonna be bad news. I wouldn't be surprised. I would guess Helping Hand on Whimsicott here. The issue now is I might actually faint to a close combat, which is really unfortunate, but I need to go for Tailwind here and Sludge Bomb on a Whimsicott. That is a shame. I think the turn where they protected Whimsicott and switched to Mienshao was like a game-winning play. That was really smart, and I didn't punish it heavily enough. Oh, they actually just go for Moonblast. Okay, they're doubling up onto Suicune to make sure I don't get Tailwind up, which makes sense. So maybe the crit then didn't matter, because maybe I don't think I would have survived 2 close combats into a Moonblast, right? Yeah, I just don't think I can win, assuming their last one, if they are Focus Sash on the Calyrex, but, you know, if Whimsicott survives here and reveals Focus Sash, that'd make me happy. But yeah, I think this is just the new meta with a lot of these Calyrex teams where the Sash is on the Calyrex instead. Which makes sense, right? Like, this game would be very hard for them to play if it weren't. And the issue here is I just try to cover for Rillaboom and Regieleki as a lead, and they just ended up not going with either of it, right? However, with Focus Sash, maybe there's a chance Eternatus can survive. That's our best bet right now. We don't even know their 4th Pokemon yet, which is a problem, because they get a big attack off here, and still have Tailwind up too. I can hope for their last one to be Rillaboom. So they have -2 defense, so Sucker Punch might actually KO Mienshao here. If they have Feint, though, this is just really bad, right? Close combat also really hurts here, though, so I actually want to Sucker Punch into the Mienshao and Sludge Bomb into the Calyrex. Because I don't want them, like, there's surely Sash, right? And they have Feint. Okay, yeah. Oh, but they're going to Eternatus. Oh, but that means my Sucker Punch fails. That's the downside. I assume, does Psyshock KO here, though, is the question? Okay, it does anyway, so we didn't have any chance. Assuming they were Focus Sashed. Yeah, well played. And this is why, like, even though those last 2 games went so well for us, it's a volatile matchup. And it's a little frustrating, right? Because, like, game 1, we basically went up against the same thing. But I didn't feel fully confident in the Urshifu Suicune lead in this one because of potential Rillaboom and Regieleki stuff. So, yeah. I'll Sucker Punch here to confirm the Sash, but there was no way to win this game with Feint and Psyshock guaranteeing the knockout onto the Eternatus here. So, yeah. Not the matchups I would have dreamed of for Specs Eternatus, but going 2-1 into 3 Calyrex teams is honestly not bad, so I'll take it. Either way, though, like, yeah, like, you can clearly tell that the kind of Calyrex meta has shifted, right? Like, it's not a coincidence we ran into a Jetpack Mienshao with, wait, was Mienshao a Jetpack in this one? Turn 1 they close combat in. Yeah, it was a Jetpack, right? Because then they had the free switch in. Okay, yeah, GG. Also, we survived with 1 HP there, even though our Focus Sash was broken. That's kind of funny. But there wasn't really a way to win this one, sadly. Like, the reality is in this one, I could have just done the same thing I did in game 1. Leading Instant and just losing it as a resource stinks. And if I had just led with Suicune and the Urshifu, I could have made the same play, which is just Sucker Punch Tailwind turn 1. And it would have put us in a much better spot. But I don't know. I just, like, if my opponent leads Rillaboom into Urshifu and Suicune, like, Rillaboom plus Calyrex, that's super scary because you could just fake out Astral Barrage. But I guess, like, even if you go Rillaboom or Regieleki, you don't really one-shot Urshifu because of Focus Sash, and even a Magnet T-Bolt into... Magnet T-Bolt from Regieleki. I'm nervous about that one-shotting Suicune. So, yeah. Alright, final game of the day, and it's up against a really cool Kyogre team with Dracovish and Indeedee. Interesting. Kyogre generally should be a favorable matchup for us, and Eternatus should be incredible for us here. So I think Rillaboom, Eternatus, Suicune for sure come out here. It's just what I want as the 4th. I mean, it's got to be Urshifu, right? Especially because you have Woodhammer on Rillaboom here too. So what's the lead I'm most scared of from my opponent's end? Whimsicott plus Dracovish, maybe? I think I'm willing to just go with Suicune and Eternatus here with Rillaboom and Urshifu in the back. This, on paper, looks good for us, but we still have to execute properly. I think Incineroar has so little value here into a team with Psychic Terrain, a Kyogre, and a Dracovish, and a Tsareena. Now, like, in a best of 3, there are niche scenarios in which you can bring Incineroar if you're hard expecting my opponent to, for example, not bring Tsareena, and it turns out, like, Intimidate to decrease Dracovish's attack just even once can influence some damage calcs. But in a best of 1 on the ladder, I am never bringing Incineroar in this game. Just makes no sense. But in a best of, like, you always have to put it in context, right? And in best of 3, if you gain valuable information early on, could actually be worth it. We're gonna go with Whimsicott and Urshifu. I mean, I generally don't mind this. As always, the question is there a Focus Sash on either Pokemon? I mean, one of the two surely is going to be, right? I have Rillaboom and I have my Urshifu in the back. They're Dark Urshifu. I almost don't want to even Tailwind turn 1. Because they could taunt me is the problem. What would Urshifu's item be here, though? Scarf Urshifu is what I honestly am expecting right now. Okay, but if you're Scarf Urshifu, you're not Scarf Kyogre. I'm down to Tailwind and the thing about Dynamax cannoning is that I can't hit Whimsicott at all because I'm Spexed. Okay, so I'm just going to Sludge Bomb Tailwind. But the issue here, there are a bunch of issues. One, if Urshifu is Scarfed. And it is. Now, notably, Whimsicott did not go for a Tailwind, so it's just going to go for a Moonblast. Meaning that I'll get Tailwind up, but the question is at what cost? Yeah, Scarf makes sense there, but at least the upside means that you're not Scarf. Oh no. It's Trick Room. Oh no. The thing is, it's still winnable because we have Snarl and we have Rillaboom in the back. And they actually bring Tsareena out, which I think is the correct decision. I feel like I literally... Didn't I lose to Trick Room Whimsicott with Kyogre a few episodes back? I just didn't see it once again. Fool me once. But fool me twice. Okay. Now here, you actually won't knock out Eternatus with the Moonblast, right? And I have Rillaboom in the back, so Rillaboom still wins in the late game against the Suicune. So here, I'm honestly down to Scald, because a burn would be huge, and Sludge Bomb. I assume they're going to triple Axle Eternatus here, but if we get a burn on Tsareena... Oh, no, it's not even... Oh, it's just Grassy Glide. That does not do much. I don't think a Moonblast KOs Eternatus here. And if you don't, Rillaboom should win. Nice. I feel like if the special attack drop didn't happen, this was a guaranteed win, but that's okay. Is that AV? Honestly, cannot tell. Okay, we still get the KO anyway. This is why Specs Eternatus is so strong. Nice. Cool. I mean, Kyogre's obviously the last one, but I have Rillaboom in the back. And I have Urshifu now. So, like, it makes sense to why they felt pressure to bring out Tsareena first. But by bringing out Tsareena first, we were able to take advantage of that. So, shoutouts to Specs here. Like, that Specs is a huge difference maker in this one. Now, it's still far from over. Like, as in, like, you know, suddenly this doesn't look that bad after a turn 1 Trick Room. But my opponent could still very easily win right now. The good thing is that we just have this Assault Vest Rillaboom in the back, right? That is probably one of the best Pokemon to have in this endgame against a Kyogre and a Whimsicott. Now, with Whimsicott, we've only seen Trick Room and Moonblast so far. So, I would also assume as Tailwind, like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a hybrid Whimsicott where, like, Kyogre can be optimized for both Tailwind and Trick Room. They just go for Water Spout. Okay. I mean, I had no way around this, right? I can't protect. I can't really afford to switch an Urshifu there either. And they just Moonblast. Okay, but the thing is now, Whimsicott should not beat Rillaboom in a 1v1. And I have Fake Out now next. Like, I have Rillaboom and Urshifu, right? Meaning that I can Fake Out into Kyogre and Wicked Blow into it. I could also just fake... Like, I just don't want to take a Specs Water Spout on Rillaboom. I'm just taking some time to think right now because, like, we might as well use all the time we have, right? so we can make the best possible decision this next turn. So the play I'm leaning towards is Fake Out into Kyogre and then Wicked Blow into it, because Kyogre might feel compelled to Protect there. So the Wicked Blow punishes a Protect, and then you're just in Grassy Glide KO range. Yeah, I generally like that. What's the alternatives? I could Fake Out Whimsicott, Close Combat Kyogre. My other question is, how slow is your Kyogre here? Like, are you slower than Rillaboom? After my Tailwind expires. This turn, I'm going to outspeed them. But there's only one turn of Tailwind left and 2 turns of Trick Room. Yeah, I really lean towards Fake Out and Wicked Blow here. Because it's guaranteed damage into Kyogre right now. You can't stop it. Yeah, and they don't Protect, which is the right play. I think if they protected there, then we actually probably just seal it up right there and then. Oh, but they actually Moonblast Rillaboom. That does make sense, because they probably realize at this point, hey, I need damage onto Rillaboom, and Urshifu is not the biggest offensive threat to me at this point in the game. But this actually should win it for us, because now what I can do is just Grassy Glide and Wicked Blow the Kyogre slot. If you don't Protect, well, Grassy Glide just KOs you. And if you Protect, Wicked Blow KOs you. So I think there, if they Moonblasted Urshifu, we would have been in a trickier spot. But they did not. So I shall Grassy Glide, and I shall Wicked Blow. Yeah, and they don't Protect. Which is even better for us, because if you Protect there, at least you deter the Glide, and now I just break Whimsicott's Sash with Wicked Blow. Yeah, and they just Moonblast. You know, this was an interesting one, because they could have just brought the Suicune out immediately rather than the Tsareena. And Tsareena having Grassy Glide rather than Power Whip there is a huge difference maker, because Power Whip does so much more damage and can actually one-shot the Suicune. It's like a damage roll, I think, but it can just get a one-hit KO onto it. So that's the trade-off that you have to often decide with Tsareena specifically, like whether or not you want Glide or Power Whip. Okay, Trick Room expires. Yeah, I mean, what do I want to do here? It's fine to just U-turn and Sucker Punch, I think. Yeah, I mean, Whimsicott's not doing enough damage to Rillaboom even if you get crits. I was just thinking if there was room to like go for a Detect there or Close Combat with Urshifu instead, but I'm fine with this outcome. Because the thing is, yeah, like, Sucker Punch there just ensures I get damage off into Whimsicott. Unless you go for like a non-attacking move, but then it means that I get a free U-turn off into you, right? I don't want to go for Wood Hammer here because I don't want to take any unnecessary recoil damage yet. I think now we can actually just Wood Hammer. I'm not 100% sure on Glide KOing, and Whimsicott crit is never KOing the Rillaboom from this spot. 2 turns of Grassy Terrain left. Yep, so we can just Wood Hammer. I think Glide does KO though. But it's one of those where I don't think it makes a difference, because even if they crit Moonblast onto Rillaboom, that plus recoil damage wouldn't even be enough to KO us. 175 down to 120. So that did 55, right? So even if you're critting, yeah, it's not close to a knockout. So the good thing for us in this game was having Suicune to bait out the Tsareena, and also thank goodness we had the Choice Specs on Eternatus here, because it just meant that we could guarantee the KO onto the Tsareena anyway. Which was, yeah, a big relief here. So the main thing, I mean, the thing is, when you use Trick Room on Whimsicott, like, Whimsicott's just so awkward after turn 2, because they just can't really do very much, right? You're just kind of sitting there and you're clicking Moonblast. The turn, I think my opponent would have had put themselves in a really good spot if they just targeted Eternatus with a triple axle that turn, but I wouldn't be surprised if they, didn't know that Eternatus isn't Choice Specs, or is Choice Specs, and just wanted to, or expecting a Protect there. So that was one in which, like, I bet my opponent just was, like, really confident on reading into Eternatus protecting or switching out that turn, and didn't consider the fact that I, couldn't actually Protect and would just Sludge Bump Tsareena for a KO. So that obviously put us in such a good spot, and the classic dilemma with Kyogre plus Tsareena is you need Tsareena to protect the Kyogre. If Tsareena goes down, then the Kyogre, is just left vulnerable. The thing is, in this end game, we actually didn't fully need the Grassy Glide anyway. We could have just gone for Wood Hammer, but eliminating Tsareena early on is always nice, and this is why, like, with Tailwind, it can get a little bit awkward if your Tailwind user is still out on, or Trick Room, sorry. In either case, if your, like, Speed Control user is still on the field, if it can't put on much pressure damage-wise. So that's why you sometimes see, like, Endeavor on Whimsicott, for example. But, yeah. that's going to be it for this episode. So thank you so much as always for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, and I'll see you all soon. All right, peace.